Hello children. Now in continuation with the animal behaviors, okay, now today we'll be looking at the next two, that is conditioning and imitation. Okay, right? So we'll go to that. Now, conditioning. Now what does conditioning mean? Conditioning means training. Okay, conditioning means giving some cues, okay, in order to make certain things happen with the animals. Okay, right? So conditional behaviors are results of associative learning. Associative learning means simple. In your school, when the bell rings, the period ends. So you associate with the bell ring. Okay, that is, say for example, first period is from 9 to 9:30. At 9:30 the bell rings. So you associate that with the bell timings. Okay, so if you say 9:30, then you should be immediately looking at your watch saying that, okay, now the bell will ring. So you are associating with the ringing of the bell. So that is basically what you have conditioned yourself to, the ringing of the bell. So 9 to 9:30, the first period is over, so the bell will ring. So you have associated yourself. Okay, now if the bell doesn't ring at 9:30, then your mind will be diverted. Okay, your mind will be diverted and you will start thinking why the bell hasn't rung, because it is a associative learning which you have developed. Okay, right? Now, conditional behaviors are results of associative learning which takes two forms. So conditional behaviors is of two types. First one is a classical conditioning and second one is a operant conditioning. Okay, first one is a classical conditioning and second one is a operant conditioning. Okay, now what is this classical conditioning? We'll see. Now, in classical conditioning, a response already associated with one stimulus is associated with a second stimulus to which it had no previous connection. Okay, so that means what? Now, dog drooling is a stimulus. So food, when we get to the dog, there is a stimulus because of which the dog drools. Okay, now this is a stimulus, one stimulus. Okay, now conditioning is what? In classical conditioning, what we do, we associate that with a second stimulus. Say for example, ringing a bell. Okay, that we'll see in the later part of the slides. Okay, now we are associating it with a second stimulus, that is, ringing of a bell is a second stimulus for the dog, that okay, my food is going to come or my food has come. Okay, to which it had no previous connection. So if a bell is ringing and the dog is coming to eat the food, that means what? It has associated it with a bell ring. Okay, and previously it has not, it doesn't have any connection with ringing a bell and then the food will come. No, it did not have any connection during that period of time. But that is what is classical conditioning. So basically what? We are training the dog. Okay, now the most famous example of classical conditioning comes from Ivan Pavlov. Okay, Ivan Pavlov was a Russian scientist. Okay, that is the date that he has survived from. Okay, right? 1849 to 1936. Okay, so this scientist laid the foundation for classical conditioning. So what did he do? The most famous example of classical conditioning comes from Ivan Pavlov's, a Russian scientist, experiments in which dogs were conditioned to drool. So dogs, you can see here, it was conditioned to drool. Now we will see what happened here. Okay, a response previously associated with food upon hearing the sound of a bell. So this is what he was trying to associate with. Okay, now what did the scientist observe? Dogs salivate or drool in response to the sight or smell of a food. So in this picture you can see that unconditional response. So what is this unconditional response? Unconditional response is nothing but the dog salivates in response to seeing the food. So when the dog has seen the food or when the dog has smelled the food, it starts to salivate more or drool even more. Okay, so that is what Pavlov observed. Okay, this is what he the scientist observed. So the dog salivates more when the smell of food is given or when the food is brought to it. Okay, right? So this is what is first thing that Pavlov observed. Then moving on, in the Pavlov's experiments, so he conducted some series of experiments. Every time a dog was given food, another stimulus was provided along the unconditioned stimulus, alongside the unconditional stimulus. So what Pavlov did, he brought the meal to the dog. Okay, you can see that he brought the meal to the dog. Okay, now once he brought the meal to the dog, he had seen that it started drooling. So you can see the saliva forming. Okay, now here what he did, he started conditioning the dog. That means what? He started ringing this bell when the food was brought to the dog. So what is he doing? This is a second stimulus that the scientist was giving. This is the second stimulus. Okay, this is the second stimulus that the scientist was giving. And what was he trying? He was trying to condition the dog. So every time the dog sees the food, the bell is rung. So whenever the dog is seeing the food, he started ringing the bell. Okay, right? So this is what was happening, okay, in this. Now, specifically, a bell was rung at that same time the dog received the food, which I just explained you now. This ringing of the bell paired with the food is an example of conditioning stimulus, which we just discussed. A new stimulus delivered in parallel with the unconditional stimulus. Now, ringing of a bell is a second stimulus, which is a new stimulus to the dog. Okay, right. Now, next, what he did? Conditioned response. Okay, now over time, so it takes time to train a dog. Okay, so over time, the dogs learn to associate the ringing of the bell with food and responded by drooling. So this is the major and most effective way what Pavlov found, conditioned response. Now here you can see that there is no food. There is no food put. But what he did, he had given the second stimulus. What did he do? He had given the second stimulus. Now when Pavlov gave the second stimulus, that without a food, the dog started drooling, or the saliva was coming from the dog. More saliva was coming from the dog. Okay. Now, over time, the dog learned to associate the ringing. So, what did the dog do? It learned to associate. That means it started associative learning. Okay. It started associative learning. Okay. The ringing of the bell with food and responded by drooling. So that is the response, that is the stimulus that the dog had shown, drooling. Okay. Eventually, they would respond with drool when the bell was rung. So because the dog was conditionally trained, okay, it was given a conditioning response. Okay. So what happened? The dog started drooling. Okay. Even when the unconditioned stimulus, the food, was absent. So this is the major criteria that Pavlov did. So when the bell was rung, because the dog has associated that when the bell is rung, the food is coming, it started drooling. Okay. So even when the unconditional stimulus was not there, but the bell was given, then even then the dog started drooling. Okay. Right. That is what Pavlov found out. Okay. Then the new artificially formed stimulus response pair consists of a conditioned stimulus, the bell ringing, and a conditioned response, drooling. So you have a condition. That means what? When the bell is ringing, the dog is drooling. That means what? The dog has a conditioned stimulus. And the ringing of the bell is a conditioned response, which is nothing but your drooling. Okay, right? Now I hope this is clear. The Pavlov's experiment is clear. Okay, now moving on to the next one, that is operant operant conditioning. Now, what do you mean by operant conditioning? Operant conditioning is nothing but is a little bit different from classical conditioning, wherein in that it does not rely on an existing stimulus response pair. Okay, so you don't have an existing stimulus. It does not rely on an existing stimulus. Now, instead, whenever an organism performs a behavior or an immediate step on the way to complete the behavior, it is given a reward or a punishment. So, this you might have seen in your various channels. When a dog performs a particular activity, it is given a reward. If it does not perform, it is given a punishment. Okay, so it is an immediate step on the way to complete the behavior. So when a reward is given, the animal is conditioned to give a response over there. Okay, give out a behavior. Okay, right? Now that is what is operant conditioning. Now see, I'll just explain you this image. Okay, now this box is called as a Skinner's box. Okay, this box, whatever you are seeing, is called as a Skinner's box. Now you have grid here. Okay, you have a metal grid. You can see these. Now this is a metal grid. Okay, this is a metal grid. Okay, now in this a rat is put. This is called as a Skinner's box. In this the rat is put. Now this box will have a food dispenser, then a response leveler, then you have an electrified grid, then you have a loudspeaker, and you have lights. So they can be green or blue lights. Okay, now what did what did Skinner do? He started feeding the rat with the dispenser. So rat started eating the food. Okay, now when the rat started eating the food, say for example a purple light which you see here was flashing. When the rat is eating the food, the purple light is flashing, and also there is a loudspeaker buzz which was given. Okay, now slowly what happened, the rat conditioned itself. So if the red light and a loudspeaker sound was given, then what? The rat used to go and eat it. Now, if at all that red light and loudspeaker was not given, but then also the rat started taking the food, then there was a shock, that is a punishment which was given to that particular rat. Okay, right? Now, because of that punishment, the rat learned to condition itself. Okay, to not take the food when the light is not flashing or the speaker is not coming. Now, when the green light was given, it was a response that the rat needs to get ready, because sooner the the purple light is going to flash and the food is going to come. So the rat used to go to the food dispenser and wait until the purple light and the loudspeaker were given. Okay, so the rat was conditioned properly, okay, by Skinner. Okay, now we'll see this. The bottom of the box consisted of a metal grid that could deliver an electric shock to rats as a punishment. The punishment because when the stimulus was not given, even when the rat took food, then there was a punishment given to it. Now, when the rat got an electric shock, each time it performed certain behavior. Okay, now it quickly learned to stop performing the behavior. So what happened here? When the rat was given an electric shock, then it understood that it is a punishment and it stopped going towards the food dispenser. Okay, only when there was a proper signal given to the rat, then only it used to go and take the food. Okay, now this is what is an operant conditioning. Okay, wherein you are actually making an animal conditioned to take the food. Okay, otherwise you are giving it a punishment if it is doing it in a different way. Okay, so this is basically operant conditioning. Now, and this concludes our conditioning as well. Okay, right? That is these two, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Okay, now moving on to the fourth type of behavior, which is your imitation. Okay, so you can see this chimpanzees here. Okay, so if you see this, it is basically imitating a human being. Okay, it is basically picking up a stick and it is basically giving a, showing its teeth or giving a light smile or its anger. Okay, so what is imitation? Now, imitation is a type of behavior where one animal copies another animal. Say for example, even if we are considering as animals, if a human being is sitting like this in front of this chimpanzee, okay, so this chimpanzee is actually imitating that particular human being, okay, because our DNA coincides with them very much. Okay, right. Now, imitation is a type of behavior where one animal copies another animal. Humans often imitate each other. So we often imitate each other. We try to imitate the